Alright, so welcome to yet another video on Women's Cricket Central. Jeet unfortunately is not available, so yeah, like the good old days, I'm back doing the solo and trying to talk about everything I want to around the sport. We are done with the two semi-finals, so Australia of course won against West Indies and England took on South Africa and comprehensively defeated them to set up a fantastic clash at the Lodge tomorrow. And of course, we will be talking about the game, we'll be talking about South Africa and West Indies, their tournament, how was it, what was there to look back at positively, and of course, what was there to look back at negatively, if that makes sense. And importantly, we'll also be previewing the final tomorrow, who I think would be favourites, at least entering the game, and who I think could potentially end up winning the trophy. So yeah, lots to talk about, so let's just cut to the chase. West Indies, of course, making the semi-final itself was a bit of a surprise, to be honest, and that's something that Jeet and I spoke about in the last video too. And their performance versus Australia in the semi-final, in that sense, was reversion to mean, because yeah, the way they went about their business, especially tactically, the kind of selections they made, I wasn't too happy with it, and I did not think that they deserved to be in the semi-finals. And once again, at the risk of sounding disrespectful, I do believe that they've got a lot of solid talents. In fact, Jazira Clarkson was one of my players to watch out for. Unfortunately, did not have the kind of tournament or the kind of impact that I would have wanted her to, but yeah, I only think this is a stepping stone for her to just move past and, of course, build on her future. But when you look at the side itself, yeah, just coming to it, one player that I do want to talk about is Kiana Joseph, because even before the tournament began, I'd spoken about how for the better part of the last couple of years, she's not really been in the greatest of form, especially with the bat in hand, because her bowling talent has not really been utilized by West Indies, and understandably so, because they've got enough spin options available outside her. But yeah, when you look at her batting, for someone who comes with her ability to clear boundaries at ease, she's not someone who scores as quickly as you would want her to. In fact, she is labeled to be this power hitter who can sort of score in excess of 140, 150. But the sad truth is that she's not done so in the last 1.5 years. And even if you want to look past it, you just look at the kind of score she's had. Only once had she scored in excess of 20 heading into the World Cup, and I don't think the World Cup itself has changed much when it came to those numbers. You could see that in the semi-final as well. Because of the way she sort of loads up and the way she tends to attack bowlers, it's very easy for oppositions to target her, and you could see that on display against someone as professional as Australia, because the Aussies knew exactly what to do against her. Do not pitch it full, do not bowl it in her arc, and yeah, just take it away from her. Try and make her access the offside region as much as possible. And once you do that, you know that the wicket is only a question or a matter of when and not if. And that was the case. She was at 8 of 19 at a point in time, then finally managed to score a couple of boundaries, but ended up scoring no more than 16 of 22, if I'm not wrong. And that's exactly been the case with her almost all year long. And that's where someone like Zaida James, once again, I really hope she gets more chances, because not only do I believe that she's a lot more proficient technically, but I also believe she's the most superior spinner to Kiana Joseph, and I think she should be in the 11 just for her spin bowling abilities. The fact that she can also bat better and more technically adept than someone like a Kiana Joseph is only a bonus. So yeah, someone like Zaida James, who is very much in the same milk as, say, a Lindsay Smith or a Sadia Iqbal, who takes the new ball, tries to drift it into the right hander or away from the left hander, and she does also generate prodigious movement with the way she sort of gets her arm ball to jag back in. And yeah, very disappointed that she got only one game. Apart from that, of course, when you look at the rest of the 11 as well, someone like an Ashwini Munisar continuing to play along with Karishma Ramirak did not make a lot of sense. Once again, you have Hayley Matthews and Karishma Ramirak, two excellent off spinners. No doubt that Ashwini Munisar is an excellent off spinner herself. But did you really need one more? Because the Aussies have two left-hand batters in Phoebe Litchfield and Beth Monisha, if you want to count Nicola Carey, who bats lower down the order. That's three. But they've also got four right-handers. And someone who could take the ball away from each of them, apart from, say, an Afi Fletcher, would have, I personally think, made a bit of a difference, if not a lot. So that was exactly why I really felt Zaida James should have gotten a bit more of a look in. Also, now moving past the tournament, of course, Zaida James is one name that they can consider, but there is someone like a Rialiana Grimmond as well. She made her debut last year versus England, and she did not look too bad. In fact, if I remember correctly, she also scored a 50 in her debut series. I don't know if it was a debut match itself, but yeah, someone who definitely looked a lot more technically competent, and also who looked to show a lot more intent. And she can also act as a great second fiddle to someone like a Hayley Matthews at the top. So with Charmaine Campbell almost sealing her spot at number 3, I think that top order looks decent. It looks a lot more stable if they are able to groom in someone like a Grimmett. Then you don't need to worry about Zaida James and her batting ability. You can just pick her for her bowling skills and bat her lower down the order. I think that top order isn't too bad. But then beyond that as well, Stephanie Taylor not getting any younger. Deandra Doughton, she unfortunately had to go through her own share of physical and mental struggles during the World Cup. Fingers crossed we will get to see the Deandra Doughton of yore very soon. But if that's not the case, West Indies really have to start focusing on how do they want to look at, replacing someone like her, because it's not going to be easy. You need to group enough options. And that's why the fact that they have no dearth for pace bowling all-rounders. They've got the likes of Chanel Hendy, Jazira Claxton, Janelia Glasgow, Alia Alain can bat, so can someone like a Shawnisha Hector. So they've got plenty of pace bowling all-rounders. Now it is about grooming them and also using them properly. Another big concern I had, of course, was the fact that none of the pacers seem to have designated roles. Apart from, say, Chanel Hendy, who was their designated new ball bowler, I could not really understand how were they trying to use, each of the remaining pacers. Take Alia Alain, Jazira Claxton, Glasgow even. They were used sparingly across each phases, and even the way they ended up bowling, it did not make a lot of sense. And I'm not even just talking about fielding plans and everything. It just seemed like at times they were expected to be defensive options, at times they were expected to be attacking options. While of course I get that everyone needs to be equally skilled at everything, you need to have some clarity with your pacers especially, because if that's not the case, they're just going to be headless chickens and just trying to do everything under the sun, and I don't think that would be a good sign for them. Because if you look at this bowling lineup, the addition of someone like a Zaida James along with Karishma Ramharak, Aarti Fletcher, I know she's also not getting any younger at 38, Hayley Matthews, that's a genuinely good and well-rounded spin bowling attack. Add the likes of Claxton, Chanel, Alia Alain, and to some extent of course Shawnisha Hector, that pace attack definitely has the fundamental skills, the raw skills that you can groom and develop into something really good. And that's where I really hope, once again, that, they are able to work on it. One thing that Hayley Matthews spoke about in the post-match presser was the fact that, there is a massive gulf between Australia and West Indies when it comes to experience, when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to investments. And I'm completely with her on that. It would be extremely stupid of me to sort of completely rubbish this and just look at West Indies' performances or the on-field performances in isolation. You'll also have to factor in, the kind of investments that are coming in, the kind of access they have to, top-notch facilities, top-notch training, top-notch physiotherapy and all of these things. And I know that they're not there yet, but I still want to believe that these uncontrollables, fortunately or unfortunately, are not in their hands. And I really hope that more money comes in. It's already very good signs because we've seen that the WCEPL has expanded and included a fourth franchise with the Jamaica team also being included. So that's already a very, very positive sign. But apart from that as well, when you talk about tactics, when you talk about team selections, those are in your hands. If you do all of these things right and the results still don't go your way, I'm completely with you guys. I understand that. But that's where I really hope that they don't sort of just focus on the uncontrollables and keep talking about it only. Of course, they still need to keep making these noises because it is true. The gulf is massive. In fact, for those who don't follow Hypercause, firstly, please do follow her on Twitter. But something that she also spoke about after the game was the gulf in the number of matches that, players from Australia, England and the likes get to play compared to someone like West Indies. The kind of comparisons she made really sort of gave you some food for thought, because when you look at a Zaida James at the age of 21, it'll take her at least 10 more years or 9 more years to be precise to have the same level of domestic experience in T20s as someone like an Alice Capsey already has at the age of 20. In fact, the number of matches that someone like an Alia Alain has played, who is arguably one of their most experienced players in T20s alone, is still far lesser than an Alice Capsey, who is nearly 10 years younger to her. Alia Alain has played only 123 games at the age of 30. Meanwhile, Alice Capsey at 20 has already played 197 T20s. This includes domestics, WPL, WBBL and of course international cricket. And that's something that West Indies will really have to look hard at, because apart from the 8 games of WCPL and their domestic tournament, which is also not a lot of games, if I'm not wrong, that totals up to around 18 to 19 games, there's not much else going on in this format. And of course, whether we like it or not, T20 or the T20 format in general is the one that can be looked at, especially by emerging teams or developing teams, to sort of expand their footprint and increase their dominance. And that's where when the most easiest format arguably to sort of develop in is being seen taken such a backseat. It's only going to get harder when you want to talk about, say, one days or even test cricket. That's something that of course will have to change, and fingers crossed we will get to see some fundamental changes, some infrastructural changes. But apart from that, I really hope that there are also some tactical calls taken by West Indies, because it is important that they get their selections right, they include the right players, and yeah, fingers crossed we will get to see a lot more of them. Because make no mistake, of course, it's no joke or no mean feat that they've managed to make it to 3 semi-finals in this decade alone, which is even more than the likes of India. So that's definitely something to be proud of, and I really hope that they just manage to build on this come the next year's ICC event, which is the Champions Trophy that's happening in Sri Lanka. Next, of course, the Saffers. I'll be honest, South Africa, personally, I really thought they started off, as one of the strongest contenders, and I genuinely thought that this squad was arguably their best ever assembled for a T20 World Cup. This performance from them, and I'm not just talking about the semi-final alone, the whole World Cup has been a massive disappointment. In fact, I wouldn't mind going as far as to say that their performances were a lot more disappointing than even Team India, despite Team India not even qualifying to the semi-finals. Simply because nothing seemed to click for them. Despite having all the resources at their disposal, their batting failed to click, their bowling failed to click, at times their fielding also gave away, and it was very unfortunate because they had the players, they had whatever they needed. Talk about dependable batters, talk about gun all-rounders, talk about power hitters, talk about excellent spinner. And of course, I will have to be mindful of not saying spinners and I'll just say spinner. But they had all of them. Sure, one can argue that their game as a whole was not the greatest versus spin. They had only Nonkululeko Malaba as their frontline spinner, and apart from that, nothing much to show for. I agree with that, but I still think these were weaknesses that could have been managed had the rest of the departments perform to their potential. And that's where somewhere I'll also have to look at the think tank and their selections and their tactics in particular and wonder why. Why did they make some calls? Kela Renaka playing just one game, did not get to bat, did not get to bowl, hardly got a chance to contribute in the tournament. Very, very, very surprising. Someone like Tasman Brits and Sunil batting together just did not make any sense whatsoever in the semi-final. In fact, I was genuinely surprised that Tasman Brits even got a chance to play, because Sunil, I think, had done a decent job opening with Laura Wolfart. We saw her performances in the India bilaterals as well, and I think she was a decent option to have. Arguably not the greatest, but of course, given the kind of options they had available, I thought Sunil was the best of the rest. Also because she was someone who came in with a lot of experience and importantly could also roll her arm over and partner with someone like a Nonkululeko Malaba, and that's where I would have definitely said she's a more dependable spinner than someone like even a Chloe Tryon. But it was very bizarre to see Sunil being dropped after a couple of games and Tasman Brits being brought in. And it did help that Tasman Brits ended up scoring a century versus Netherlands, taking nothing away from the knock. Brilliant knock, a World Cup 100, something to be massively proud of. But we cannot also look past the fact that Tasman Brits unfortunately has not been the kind of opener that South Africa or even neutrals like me would have wanted her to be. For someone who tends to strike it less than 100 in the power play more often than not, she's also got the lowest strike rate for any opener since 2024 batting in the power play, and that's just not the kind of numbers you would want your opener to have. It doesn't help that she is a bit of a boundary or nothing person. So you would see her score the odd boundary but also dot up a lot, which meant there wasn't a lot of strike rotation, which in turn would put a lot of pressure on your partner, and that would in turn lead to different problems. And that's something we got to see even in the semi-final. Laura Wolfart, Tasman Brits began decently, Laura doing bulk of the damage, apologies. And once Laura got out, you could not see them come back, because you also saw Anneli Dirksen unfortunately get out early, and then Sunil and Tasman Brits just got stuck. Neither of them were able to rotate strike as frequently as they should have. Neither of them were able to get those boundaries as frequently as they would have. And also again, I wouldn't fault Tasman Brits for her intent, because she was genuinely trying to hit those boundaries, trying to bring in those attacking shots. But it was just one of those days where the attacking shots did not translate to boundaries, and it meant that she wasn't able to score more than 51 or 45. And yeah, that included 16 dot balls. Just not the kind of performance you would want from one of your key players in a World Cup semi-final. Same goes for Sunil. But where I will cut Sunil some slack is the fact that she started off opening for South Africa, was then dropped, was then brought back in and slated in the middle order in place of Dane van Niekerk. Even in the semi-final, she batted at number 4, which isn't her preferred position. You have sort of, built this side with her opening at the top, leading into the World Cup, and out of nowhere, if you sort of slot her in the middle order, I don't think that's the greatest of ideas, especially in a World Cup semi-final, even more so because they had enough batting options available. Sure, ahead of the game, you might have thought Sunil would be a designated number 4. But having seen the situation, having known the required run rate, having known the equation, and having known the fact that there is a struggling Tasman Brits at the other end who was at 20 of 19, if I'm not wrong, at that point in time, matters just became worse, and you did not really help yourself by sending in Sunil at number 4. What I would also have to say is, of course, Sunil hasn't batted in the middle order in a very long time. The last time she batted at number 4 was nearly 2 years ago in 2024 versus England. So that's a lot of time without having played in a role like this, and you are expecting someone to just fill in. Once again, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, it does feel like a recipe for disaster. Apart from that, of course, like I said, Keela Renaka, it's very, very, very unfortunate that she did not get enough chances. In fact, ahead of the semi-final, I wanted South Africa to make 2 changes. One, of course, was Tasman Brits being replaced by Sunil, and the other was Dani van Niekerk being replaced by Keela Renaka. They kind of went half and half, wherein they did bring in Sunil in place of Dani van Niekerk. But yeah, that only meant that they were able to pair Sunil and Tasman Brits, and they did not have someone like a Keela Renaka who is a genuinely good off spinner and also an excellent power hitter. So it was a bit bizarre, the selections importantly, and I really hope that they look deep into their structure, into the way they want to play their cricket, because this side right now is really, really top tier. Make no mistake, once again, this is a side that's made it to 3 World Cup semi-finals, or rather 4 World Cup semi-finals in the last 4 years and 3 World Cup finals. So this is definitely a side to be proud of. This is definitely a side that is worthy of being trophy contenders. But it is important for them to realize the gap between being trophy contenders and trophy winners. A name that I really want to see a lot more of going forward would be the wrist spinner Seshni Naidu. She's not gotten a lot of chances. Once again, comes from the under-19 batch that has done really well for South Africa. But yeah, I hope that they start grooming in her as well, because the lack of a frontline spinner outside Nonkululeko Malaba has really hurt them a lot, because they did not give Nondumiso Shangase enough chances. So yeah, you knew that she's not going to get a lot of game time. Someone like a Seshni Naidu, because of her wrist spin, will add a different dimension to this bowling attack. That's where I really think she could add more value. Importantly, it could also help South Africa reduce their dependence on someone like a Chloe Tryon. Imagine Keela Renaka, Sunil Lees, Seshni Naidu and Nonkululeko Malaba in your 11. Then yeah, more often than not, you wouldn't have to use Chloe Tryon services, and that's where they should be at, because Chloe Tryon, whether we like it or not, is not the most dependable spinner out there. She's someone who consistently errs on the shorter side, tends to bowl a lot of half-trackers, and that's not what you want. Because we saw that in the last game as well, which was the semi-final. The pressure was built, Nonkululeko Malaba hadn't done too badly, and you knew when Chloe Tryon got the ball, a lot of runs could be expected, and that's exactly what happened. 11 runs were scored, the pressure was slightly eased, and Nat Silverbrandt and Heather Knight managed to sort of really kick up a gear and just take the game away from South Africa. Miani Smith is another name who I really hope gets more chances for the senior side. Once again, an under-19 export, she was a part of the inaugural under-19 World Cup where she represented South Africa, didn't do too badly, and of course made her debut earlier this year versus West Indies. In fact, she even scored a debut 50, I want to say, or was it across the series, I'm not sure, but she did score a 50, and she also gave a very good account of herself. And I think she's another name that South Africa can consider in their top order. Especially with the way Sunil Tasman Brits have performed, it is important that they bring in some new blood, because yeah, you can't sort of function this way. When you look at the batting numbers, importantly, I kept talking about how, Tasman Brits, Sunil, the likes of them tend to dot it up a lot, might not score enough boundaries. The sad truth was, now were they able to rotate strike consistently for South Africa to be able to put above par totals. And I'm not just talking about the duo here, I'm talking about the South African batting lineup in general. When you look at the numbers, it's staggering that South Africa ranked below the likes of Scotland and New Zealand, who had a very, very, very poor tournament and are almost on par with someone like Sri Lanka when it came to boundary percentage. This is despite having excellent batters in Laura Wolfhard, Maizan Cup, Nadine de Klerk, and even Keela Renaka and Chloe Tryon if you want to include. Even when you look at their batting numbers in general, it is very unfortunate that South Africa ended their tournament with a strike rate below Scotland and even New Zealand, who had a performance or a World Cup to forget themselves. And when you look at their balls per dismissal, they lost more wickets than the likes of West Indies, Scotland, Ireland, and even Sri Lanka. In fact, only 2 teams lost wickets more frequently than South Africa: Pakistan and Netherlands. Not the 2 sides you would want to be competing with, especially when you are considering yourself to be contenders for the title. So that is something that they will have to look at. Another thing that we'll have to also talk about is their bowling, because their batting rightfully copped a lot of criticism, but their bowling seemed to get away, and it is very unfortunate once again because I thought that in Ayabonga Khaka, Marizan Kap, and Shabnam Ismail, they arguably had the best pace bowling attack heading into the tournament. With the conditions they had available, I really thought that the pace bowling attack will be able to make up for the lack of enough decent spin bowling options. But that just wasn't to be the case. In fact, when you look at numbers, they had the second worst economy of any sides, only behind Netherlands. And when you look at strike rate, which is of course how frequently you took wickets, once again, not the greatest numbers. They had only Ireland, Sri Lanka, Netherlands, and a catch dropping contagious disease plague New Zealand behind them. Once again, just extremely bizarre. The experience, the kind of X factor that they have in their side, very, very, very unfortunate that the numbers that we got to see were something like this. And I really hope that they don't get complacent seeing that, you know what, they made yet another semi-final. Sure, the silver lining to something like this is the fact that despite such poor performances, they were able to pull through and notch up yet another semi-final spot. But it only goes on to show the kind of potential they have, and which is why I really hope that they are able to cash in on this, and someone like a Mandla Marshimbi really marshals their troops and gets going ahead of the Champions Trophy. So fingers crossed, we will get to see them do something very special very soon. Of course, now talking about the final itself, it is England taking on Australia, and the game is coming live from the Lords. It's going to be a fascinating encounter, and of course, one that we'll all be looking forward to. It's two sides that have remained undefeated throughout the tournament, so no two questions about the fact that this is also two of the strongest sides and the most informed sides that we're talking about. The host England, of course, have been professional through and through with the way they've batted, the way they've bowled, importantly the way they fielded, and that's something that I did not think I would be saying about them, but I've been mighty impressed with the way they've conducted themselves, carried themselves, and it is very important for them also to be able to get a trophy, because the better part of the last, or this decade in fact, has not been the greatest for them. Apart from the fact that they made the 2022 World Cup final, they've not really had a lot of performances to remember. In 2023, in 2024, they've not made the World Cup semis. In the ODI World Cup as well, they were knocked out by South Africa in the semi-final. So this is definitely something that they will want to make count, especially with Nat Brandt also available. Of course, not fully fit. She'll only be available for batting, but I think that's more than enough because she can win her side games just with the bat alone. And importantly, this is the first time Australia and England will be facing each other in a final in over 8 years, and that is going to be very fascinating. There are a lot of players for the English side who even played in that 2018 final, so that is something that they will be very happy about. Of course, when I say it's been 8 years, I'm only referring to the T20 format. The likes of Nat Silverbrand, the likes of Danny Whitehall, Sophie Eccleston, Heather Knight, they all were a part of the 2018 final. Of course, Sophia Dunkley was also a part of the 11 back then. I'm not sure if she'll play tomorrow, but you can expect her to, of course, be a part of the setup through and through. Of course, on the other side, you've got the Aussies, the mighty, strong, indomitable Aussies, and that is definitely going to be a side who will have their task cut out for them when it comes to oppositions. And when you look at how Aussies have performed, if I said England were professionals through and through, Australia was just Australia through and through, because I'm running out of adjectives to describe how good they have been, how strong they have been, how comprehensive each of their victories have been. Be it South Africa, be it India, be it West Indies, each of the so-called top sides have absolutely been no match to them when they've played them. And that's something that Australia will take a lot of confidence from. Of course, someone like an Elise Perry seems to not be 100% fit, but like Shalini Ishki said, you will still expect her to play, and they will still sort of play her irrespective of whether she's fully fit or not, because they would want someone like her on the field. The one change that I think Australia could consider making, of course, would be bringing in someone like an Alana Kingin, potentially in place of a Nicola Carey, because Carey unfortunately has not played much of a role, or has not had to play much of a role. In fact, they've already got Lucy Hamilton, Kim Garth, and even someone like an Annabelle Sutherland to take care of their pace bowling duties. And of course, when it comes to spinners, they've got enough options. But because it is the Lords, and we've seen how the Lords has functioned so far in the tournament, in the 3 games that have been played over here, which was England versus West Indies, Bangladesh versus South Africa, and India versus Australia, spinners definitely played a much bigger role when it came to wicket-taking ability. They easily were the more attacking option, at least the way captains used them over here. But it also meant that they conceded a lot more runs and a lot more boundaries. And because this is a central wicket, unlike the one versus India, where it was one of the side wickets, which meant one side was shorter than the other, Here it's going to be a central wicket. In fact, the boundary dimensions are supposed to be 63 and 62 meters on either sides of the square, and the straight boundary is supposed to be 71 meters. So you can expect equal competition or fair competition between spin and pace. But based on what we saw in the group stage, spinners played a much bigger role when it came to taking wickets, because they took a wicket every 19 deliveries as opposed to pacers who were able to take a wicket only every 30 deliveries. So that's roughly a 40% difference, and spinners have been 40% more effective, if I have to put it bluntly. But it's also come at a cost. The reason batters have lost a lot more wickets to spin is because they've attacked them a lot more. They've taken a lot more risks versus them, and that has meant that spinners have also ended up with a higher economy and they've conceded a lot more boundaries. When you look at how pacers have fared in terms of at least defensive bowling abilities, pacers have conceded runs at only 7.2 per over as opposed to 8.1, which is what the spinners have gone at. And importantly, only 13.7% of all deliveries bowled by pacers have been hit for boundaries at the Lords this World Cup, as opposed to 15.4 by spinners. So you can see a clear difference in how batters have gone about their business versus pace and spin. So that is something that Australia would want to keep in mind, because Alana King, once again, is an X factor, is a great option to have, especially when it comes to taking wickets. She's a lot more conventional compared to someone like a Georgia Wareham, who's a lot more quicker, a lot more flatter in trajectory, and that's where Alana King, with her traditional conventional loopy wrist spin, can be effective, especially on a dry evening at the Lords in London tomorrow. So it will be interesting if Australia actually go through with this change, or they just stick to their best 11 and focus on what's worked for them best. Because yeah, make no mistake, it's not like Alana King not playing will sort of dampen their chances or anything, but if I do believe that her entering the 11 will strengthen their chances at the very least. So it'll be very fascinating to see how this game goes on. Of course, Australia start as favourites for me, but I will be rooting for the Poms simply because I want them to finally win a trophy. And like we had also spoken about at the preview, Charlotte Edwards is the only captain to have won a T20 World Cup for England, and that came in 2009 at the Lords. It will be extremely poetic if she's also there at the Lords tomorrow, helping England win yet another T20 World Cup. Until then, it's a goodbye from me. Thank you so much for staying till the end. And if you have, please make sure you hit the like button if you haven't already. Make sure you subscribe to Women's Cricket Central, because there'll be a lot more content coming even in the post-World Cup era, if that makes sense. Because there's 100 coming up, there'll be a lot of bilateral matches to talk about. Until then, it's a goodbye. Take care.